Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is where you are. I'm Martin Cliffe. Welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to continue on a topic that I addressed in a video a few weeks ago, where I talked about minimalist concepts for musicians. And this week, we're going to address minimalist mindset for musicians. This was brought about from a conversation in the comments and a few other things. Where that video was very much about using minimalist concepts to help you when you're buying gear and all that kind of thing, but there's a lot more to it than that, and so yeah, I thought it warranted a second video. Before we go any further, make sure you click that thumbs up icon to like the video. That would be really appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I produce videos twice a week, mostly music related, although other stuff including minimalist content is in there as well. And comment down below if anything I say here makes you think, or if you come up with any other things that might also be useful. So concept number one is the boredom factor. Now, there have been studies that have shown that children in particular need to be bored at certain parts in life, and that's one of the struggles with modern life, is that they don't always get that opportunity. Now, and I believe that most of us as musicians will admit that we're still really just big kids. We don't really grow up, and I think this is something that's a big part of what makes us creative people. And sometimes, being bored enables us to open up a new avenue of creativity. This will come up again later on, but it's something that I think can really get us to think outside the box. And one of the things that can distract us sometimes from that boredom is constant input, constant trying new things, fiddling with new things, experimenting, all this. And I don't know that that benefits us as musicians. Having the more creative people, in terms of the people who pioneered a lot of the musical styles and stuff, a lot of that came not out of abundance but out of scarcity. And so you make do with what you have, and you have periods of downtime where a kind of creative spark comes and brings you on. And I think that is something that can be really beneficial to all of us as musicians. I think it's important to be realistic about where we're at as musicians. Now, this has a lot to do with thinking about things like just-in-case items. This is a big thing in the minimalist movement. What is a just-in-case item? It's something that you don't really need, but you keep to one side just in case something breaks or you need to replace something. Now, I would say if you are a regularly gigging musician, having a backup instrument is not a just-in-case item. That is an essential part of being a musician. But if you're someone who plays mostly at home, and particularly if you play multiple instruments, say you play the odd gig, maybe 3 or 4 gigs a year, which is what a lot of us seem to only be doing at the moment. And you have a Strat and a Les Paul, or a Telly and a Les Paul, or whatever it is. You don't probably need a second Telly and a second Les Paul. Maybe having an extra guitar in a different tuning. I mean, that's something that is a useful thing, but being realistic about where you are and maybe where you aspire to be. Very few of us are in a position where we need to have, and I've been there, I've done it. I used to go out and take 5-6 guitars out with me to bar gigs, and it was kind of bonkers. And after a while I realized that for 99% of what I was doing, I could actually get away with, even though I played in different tunings, taking 2 guitars and using a capo. Because most of the time I was in D standard. I would use a pitch shifter for the 2 songs in the set that were in C standard, and put a capo on the 1st fret for the song in E flat, and on the 2nd fret for a song in E. And that worked. That saved me carting 4 extra guitars around with me. I still had a spare guitar in case I broke a string, which was important, particularly with using floating bridges that I was at the time. But yeah, like for me, I mostly play, certainly in any kind of live context, my two main Sirs. My blue has 2 humbuckers and all red has 3 single coils. So that would be what I would take out to a gig. And okay, it might not be ideal to play a song that you want the humbucker sound on with single coils, but you can get away with it. And for most people, that is fine. If I'm realistic about my situation and the playing position that I find myself in, I don't need 3 guitars with humbuckers and 3 guitars with single coils. Now, at the moment, I find myself in an interesting quandary, because you'll say, but you have 2 Sirs with humbuckers and 2 Sirs with single coils. And you'd be right. And that is something that I am coming to terms with. But at that point, still, I have guitars tuned standard and guitars tuned down. You could say, yes, you could use a capo, and you're absolutely right. But I have these, to me, they've been customized by me in such a way that they would be more difficult to resell. And in fairness, will have sold, hopefully, within a month or 2 of this video coming out, 4 Sirs. So I'm kind of okay with keeping the other 4. There's a lot of stuff in minimalism about decision fatigue, where that means that just the act of, we only have so many, and it does vary from person to person, it depends a lot on intelligence levels and all that kind of thing, but we only have so many decision slots in our brain on a day-to-day basis. So reducing that decision fatigue by limiting ourselves to a more realistic set of instruments or effects or whatever it is actually can again be something that prevents, it doesn't get in the way of what we're doing, what we're attempting to do. It can really help us just to think, how can I make better use of what I have, which is also a great thing for creativity, because maybe you'll find something unexpected while you're tweaking that pedal or whatever it is that takes you on a whole different road, increases your creativity. But also, there is so much overlap between most gear that we have. If you have 8 fuzz pedals, odds are that there's 2 or 3 different realistic fuzz sounds that most of us would use. So we probably don't need 8 fuzz pedals, and I'm very much guilty of this, which is why I'm in the process of reducing my fuzz pedals to 3. And it's not just in the studio. A lot of us like to maybe have a more simplified board for live, because it's not only less to go wrong, but it's also, again, less decisions to make on the fly, when really, in a live situation, we want to be concentrating on our audience. We don't want to be concentrating on our pedal board. At the same time, in a recording situation, we want to be concentrating on our performance. We don't want to be concentrating on the gear that's around us. So having less decisions to make can actually really benefit us in every stage of musicianship. If I were to walk into a room with 40 guitars, it would take me time to think which guitar to play, by which point the idea that I've been buzzing around in my head for the last half hour might completely disappear out of the window. Whereas just having 2 or 3 guitars, and you can say, okay, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to get this idea down, that can really, really be a good thing. So avoiding decision fatigue is a huge kind of mindset shift that I think so many of us can benefit from. At the same time as all that, I would say that number 4 is, if you're a collector, own it. Be a collector. I have never set out to collect guitars or pedals or amps or any of those things. It's kind of happened to me by accident. You could say happy accident in many cases, but I've never set out to do that. I've set out to collect Lego, specifically Star Wars and more likely Harry Potter Lego, and I've set out to collect on a much smaller scale rotary watches. But I never set out to collect music gear. I just wanted to have the gear that met my creative vision. But there's nothing wrong with being a collector if collecting things and the collection that you have brings you joy. You hear a lot about stuff sparking joy and adding value to your life. And if you want to collect every Boss pedal, which I know a couple of people who I respect, and they have sought to do things along those lines, fine, own being a collector. There is nothing wrong with that if that collecting process and the collection brings you joy. But that is a whole different thing from having tools as a musician. Now, maybe you collect books or vinyl of music, and if you're using that for a specific purpose of furthering your musicianship, or if you're just collecting it to have a collection, that's fine. But be realistic about what it is. Is it a collection, or is it part of your day-to-day music gear? Is it something you need, and is it something therefore that if you don't need it, could it be pared down? If the collection brings you joy, keep it. But if it's a collection that you need, that you think realistically doesn't actually add any value to your life, is just taking up shelf space, or in particular if you're having to pay for storage for it. Pedals generally are okay. They don't take up a lot of room, although I am in the process of getting rid of 20 to 30 pedals because they're not adding any value to me. They're literally just sitting in a cupboard. But guitar cases and stuff like that, they take up a lot of room, and I've known of so many people who've had to take out extra storage because they don't have room in their apartment for all the guitar cases. So what do you do with them? Now, we've had to take out a storeroom in our apartment block for all the kind of drum hardware and PA gear and all that kind of stuff that we brought with us, because I've just not had the opportunity to use it. And I don't know how easy it will be to downsize that in this place. So there are challenges there. And there are things that I absolutely can envisage, using again when the world reopens. So they are adding value. Well, they should. Are they just in case items? Are they emergency items? Are the items that I can genuinely see me using again? I'd like to think I could genuinely see me using them again. I downsized a lot of stuff before we left Hong Kong. But there again, they're not collections. And a collection to me is a whole separate thing. If you're a collector, fantastic. Own your collection. Own being a collector. There was an article I read recently about gas versus creativity. It might have been on a Premier Guitar editorial or something like that. But there is a lot of kind of sense in the thought that a lot of us spend a lot of time researching, reading, watching videos about new gear, when actually not only does the gear that we have meet the needs of the stuff that potentially we're looking to buy, there might be a 1% difference in it, but also that time is being taken up when we could be being creative. So getting out of that gas mindset, the gear acquisition syndrome mindset of constantly looking for the next thing, the better thing, just the slightly different coloured thing, the limited edition thing, whatever that thing is. Getting beyond that mindset, again, I think is something that can really, really help us in our creativity and therefore furthering our musicianship. It kind of goes back to that boredom factor, that if I've got 50 overdrive pedals to try, then that's going to detract from time that I can actually start writing cool riffs. Because I'll be so focused on finding the sound. And in the end, most of us, I think, probably look for similar sounds from our overdrive pedals. I have 3 overdrive pedals on my board, and any other overdrive pedal that I have, I've just used to recreate one of those 3 sounds. So what's the point in having the other overdrive pedals? Now, I have a couple of other overdrives. I have one on my church board, and I have one on my board in the UK. And any overdrives I have beyond that will be moving on, because they're surplus, they're unnecessary, they're just adding to that block that is getting in the way of creativity. Now, not everyone needs to not have clutter around with them to function. In fact, I think I'm a reasonably extreme example where I basically, I can't function with stuff around me. I need to have as little as possible distracting me when I'm working. For some people, having stuff around them, the classic example always given is Einstein, and I'm never comfortable with that because Einstein was not messy for the sake of being messy. Einstein was messy because he had so many different thoughts on the go that he liked to be able to jump straight on that particular project when he was, when that thought came to him. And that's in the same way, you might see people who have like huge U-shaped desks with different projects on the go. That is a whole different thing to me than just being surrounded by clutter and then not being able to find what you want to work on. I don't believe for an instant that Einstein was that kind of person. I believe that he was the person whose brain worked at lots of different levels and just wanted to be able to get straight on with whatever he did. And that kind of ties in with the whole thing of, as a guitarist, keep the guitars that you want to use out and to hand, because you're more likely to play a guitar that's out than a guitar that's in a case. If you have a guitar rack that has 5 guitar slots, then keep 5 guitars in it. But probably any guitars that don't make those 5 slots, you don't need. My final kind of mindset thought that I've come up with is almost, you could say, the other way from the minimalist way of thinking. But really, I would say, if you use it, keep it. I don't think even some of the more extreme minimalist people out there who would say that you should get rid of stuff that you use and you need. Yes, you can be a guitarist who only has 1 guitar, 1 amp, no pedals, and maybe that fills the joy, that fills you with joy, and that fills the niche that you want to do. Not all of us are like that. And I have what for some people would be perceived as a reasonably sized pedal board. I'm looking down and I can see 16 pedals in front of me. That's a lot for some people. But at the same time, everything that's on this board I use, and I use regularly. Also, everything that's on this board I have specifically chosen, and it brings me joy. It adds value to my life and to my musicianship and everything else. If it didn't, it wouldn't make this board. So if you use it, keep it. Could I get away with 2 guitars? Yes, I made a video saying you need 2 guitars, which surprisingly didn't get as much traction as I hoped it would. I'll link it below. But realistically, most of us need 2 guitars. But I use regularly 6 guitars. I have a couple of guitars that serve very specific purposes. So my JM Pro, I keep in Nashville tuning. That is something that I use for recording because it's such a faff to restring a guitar in Nashville tuning and tweak the nut if it needs it and adjust the truss rod and get the pickups balanced differently and stuff, that it's not something that I would want to go about swapping over every couple of days or whatever it is. If I want to record a part in Nashville tuning, which is something that I really like to do, you could say we'll get a 12 string, but a 12 string is never quite in tune. Whereas a guitar in Nashville tuning is much more easy to get intonated. So that guitar doesn't get played as much as some of my other guitars. Fair enough. Obviously I have a guitar, Snowy, in the UK. And then I have my Tally and my Les Paul that I've been using for Martin's Monday pedal playthroughs because they are guitars that people are familiar with. That makes more sense in that context. And then I have my 4 main Surs that I've had for a long time and I use all the time and I play all the time. I have amps that I use, so I'm going to keep. I could go down to 1 amp, but then I would have to lug it around everywhere with me. Plus I like running with 2 amps. I have an amp behind me that will be going to church and I'll be using at church, and then I'll keep it at church. Now, you could say, well, you don't need to have a separate amp for church. It's like, no, but we don't have a car. So taking an amp by a taxi or on the bus and stuff is a pain when you've got a guitar and a pedal board and other stuff. So that's why I have a church board and a church amp, so that I can leave them there and just take a guitar with me. We've made the decision that for our carbon footprint that we're not going to have a car, at least for the time being, while we're here in Bucharest. So yeah, the offset of that is that I'm going to have an amp at church. So that is, yeah, just a decision of, if you use it, keep it. There is no harm, and I don't think any other than the most extreme minimalists would say that there is any harm in keeping stuff that you use. If you use it, particularly if you use it for any kind of work context, if it adds value to your life, then you're benefiting from it, so keep it. Just maybe assess the things that you're not using and think, would this bring added value to somebody else? Would not having this cluttering up my life, cluttering up my mind, cluttering up the decision, would that help me as a person? And then you can kind of put some kind of value on that, which is something that I think is important, and then say, okay, is it worth the hassle and the expense of going through and selling it? Or is there someone I can just give it to who would benefit from it? I have given away quite a number of things over the last few years that I could sell and I could potentially make money from. But if I've got a friend who would really benefit from it, I might offer them a much better deal. Or sometimes I just give them because they benefit from them. They add value to their lives, obviously only if they want them. And they're not adding value to me anymore. So they're actually benefiting me by somebody else having them. And that's something that I think is important, and it's something that took me a while to learn. And yeah, there are stuff that I have sold, and there is a lot more stuff that I will be selling. This week I've shot 16 Marston's Monday pedal playthrough videos, and all 16 of those pedals will be being sold because they're sat in a cupboard. They don't add value to me. It's time to move on. So I hope this little look at 6 concepts of minimalist mindset and how that can apply to musicians has benefited you. Hope this video sparks joy, or at least makes you think a little bit. Like the video if you think you benefited from it. Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. But always remember, the boredom factor. Would actually having less stuff enable me to become bored and therefore creative? Be realistic. Where am I at as a musician? Not just in terms of playing ability, but in terms of my life situation. Does it really benefit me having this extra gear? Or do I even need more gear? So do I need to sell some stuff so I can buy something new? Because again, if it brings joy and adds value to you, have it. Remember decision fatigue. Does having this item make me make an extra decision every time I come to use it as to whether that is beneficial? Or would having 2 instead of 3 or 1 instead of 5 of these actually make my life easier? If you're a collector, own being a collector. Own your collection. Your collection brings you joy. That's fine. Don't let that get in the way. Remember that breaking free of the gear acquisition syndrome mindset will potentially enable most of us to focus more on creativity and being more creative as musicians and more invested in the music rather than just the stuff. And finally, if you use it, keep it. Thanks for watching. I've been Cliffe. I'll see you next week. Take care.